Hello, historians. Welcome to On This Day in History, your daily insight into what has happened in the past and how it has influenced the events of the present. So, let's take a short look at what happened today. On this day in history, the 22nd of May, in 334 BC, Macedonian army of Alexander the Great defeated Darius III of Persia at the Battle of Granicus. This, as far as I'm aware, was the last time there was any trouble at all in the Balkan Peninsula between Greece and Turkey, or Greece and Persia, or the Ottoman Empire. And, well, okay, so that obviously didn't happen. But this was where Alexander the Great starts getting his reputation for conquering and conquering and conquering. He took over what was thought of as the entire world at the time. They didn't seem to realize that there was the whole rest of the world out there. Only what they saw was the whole world, obviously. But kind of a big deal. In 1455, and the reason we have this picture of the roses was the opening battle of the 30 Years' War of the Roses between the family York and the family Lancaster. And as a result of this battle, Richard of York took St. Albans and captured King Henry V. So this was sort of like not sort of, it was a civil war in England over who should be the ruler. Now, funnily enough, even though they did have different insignias with the Lancaster Rose and the York Rose, this was not referred to as the War of the Roses until after it had already taken place. The first known reference to the War of the Roses as calling it the War of the Roses was actually in Shakespeare over 100 years later. Now, the picture of these particular roses is where we get the Tudor rose from, because this war would eventually come to an end when Henry VII, father of King Henry VIII, would win at the Battle of Bosworth and become King of England, and he would marry Elizabeth of York and unite the Lancaster and York houses into one, hence the creation of the Tudor rose. It is a cross between the Lancaster and York roses. On this day in 1840, the transporting of British convicts to New South Wales colony is abolished, so no more convicts to Australia after that point. We've done a deep dive on this in an earlier video, but I just want to point this out again and just make reference to it, just the fact that it's been, nearly 200 years at this point, guys. We need to stop saying Australia, oh yeah, the convicts there. We need to get over that. Okay, on this day in 1859, and the reason we have this book, The Complete Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, who would obviously become Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, knighted for his services to literature, was born. And interestingly enough, just a couple of things on Sherlock Holmes. He never actually says the phrase "elementary, my dear Watson" in the books. I just want to point that out. It's often misquoted. Sherlock Holmes is also the most often portrayed fictional character in movies. Sherlock Holmes has been in more films as the character, obviously different actors, but as the character of Sherlock Holmes than any other character in the history of film. He is beloved, and one of the things I love about Sherlock Holmes is he doesn't overpower people, he doesn't beat people up, he's not the strongest, he uses his mind. That is fantastic. And on this day in 1939, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, signed what was known as the Pact of Steel in Berlin, Germany. And that is, in fact, going to be our deep dive of the day, the Pact of Steel. So, what is the Pact of Steel? Well, in Germany, it's called the Stahlpakt. In Italian, it's the Patto d'Accio. I'm sure my Italian is perfect pronunciation, as was my German. It's actually technically called the Pact of Friendship and Alliance between Germany and Italy, but that doesn't quite sound as cool, so they didn't call it that. It's an agreement between fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, and obviously signed on this day in 1939. This is the formalizing of their alliance, which had actually begun a few years earlier. So there's two parts to this pact. The first is the formal text. It says they would continue to help each other. Oh, isn't that nice? But the second part of the agreement is that they need to make their military and economic policies to be the same. They have to follow the same military and economic policies. They're agreeing to do that. Now, the original name of the pact came from Italian leader Benito Mussolini because Hitler wanted to call it the Pact of Blood, but he didn't think he'd be able to sell that in Italy. So it became the Pact of Steel. So keep in mind, the second part of this is they agreed to make their military and economic decisions in the same way. That's what this agreement is actually about. So this is a political cartoon. I love political cartoons. I think they express the ideas of the time very, very well. About this particular agreement. So the idea was that Mussolini and Hitler have become friends. They can mutually benefit each other. This is fantastic. Mussolini's got this bag of ideas, and you can see these bag of proposals that he's bringing. He wants the support of Germany in expanding Italian influence in Europe, in Africa, in around the world. He wants to be a big man, basically. So, what were the actual consequences of the Pact of Steel? Well, it's interesting because it was both defensive and offensive, which wasn't usually done. Usually, countries had agreements that were, if you get attacked or we get attacked, we'll help each other out. This was, if you attack someone else, I'll help you attack them as well. That's relatively unheard of and a very interesting development. And it goes for 10 years. Now, it means that this Pact of Steel is signed in 1939 and it is binding for the next 10 years. But this actually, Germany was a much more powerful country by 1939, and this generally gives them the upper hand in negotiations. Pretty much it means that Italy can't make its own policy, if you will. It can't come up with its own ideas, can't come up with its own path in terms of foreign policy or its economy. They've basically surrendered that to Germany. Members of the Italian government, including the signer of this particular agreement, the foreign minister, Galeazzo Ciano, and again, I'm sure my pronunciation is perfect, was actually against the pact, but he had no choice because he lived in a dictatorship form of government. Mussolini told him to sign it, so he signed it. So why would Mussolini sign something that clearly gives the upper hand to Hitler? That's an excellent question. Well, if we look, this is how it was seen, again, a political cartoon, as dinner for two, where obviously Germany's getting the majority of the benefits here, with Benito Mussolini being the loyal lapdog of Hitler. That is definitely reflective of reality in the sense that Hitler definitely was the leader, the stronger of the two, the dominant force. But that wasn't actually always the case. See, Mussolini came to power with this march on Rome in 1922 in Italy. Hitler saw this happen, saw the fascists take control with his march on Rome, and he tried something similar in 1923 with the beer hall putsch in Munich. He essentially saw Mussolini take power in Italy. He said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So he tried it for himself and failed. He ended up in prison because of it. He wouldn't come to power in Germany until 1933. So Mussolini's been in power a lot longer than Hitler has. So Mussolini's definitely got the lead at this point. In fact, Hitler had been thwarted or stopped with his first intervention in foreign policy, where he was attempting to unite with Austria, to expand Germany into Austria, to unite the two countries, which was banned by the Treaty of Versailles. And he first attempted this in 1934, and Mussolini actually intervened and stopped it by placing Italian soldiers on the border with Austria, threatening to confront German soldiers if they were to cross on their border with Austria. Hitler backed down. So Mussolini is feeling like he has the power in this relationship. He's feeling like a strong leader. And he did this because he was trying to get the approval of Britain and France at the time. So Hitler has been stopped at this point by Mussolini. Mussolini feels like he's just as strong, if not stronger, than Hitler. But by 1936, things had changed. Italy, for many reasons, Abyssinia, you can Google it if you wish, the Lacan effect, all these things. has sort of lost faith with Britain and France, and he's looking for a new ally. And he finds that ally in Hitler. They actually both intervened in the Spanish Civil War on behalf of the fascists and realized that, hey, if you like fascism and I like fascism, maybe we should become best friends. So Mussolini, uh, these early relations with Hitler in 1936, is feeling definitely like an equal. That is not the case by 1939. But Mussolini didn't seem to realize that. He seemed to think that by signing the Pact of Steel, remember, this Pact of Steel essentially gives Italy no choice over its own policies. When he signed it, he thought that, oh, but if I want to do something, Hitler will do it because that's what the Pact says. He will listen to me. We're partners in this. That's the way Mussolini saw it. And because of that, for example, they've become friends. Hitler was able to achieve Anschluss with Austria in 1938. So Mussolini saw this expansion of Germany into Austria and was like, well, yeah, but he was only able to do that because I let him, because I'm a nice guy. Hitler owes me a favor. Things of this nature. So Mussolini told Hitler, we'll be ready for war in 2 to 3 years. Now that is at the meeting, or sorry, at the negotiations for the Pact of Steel. So that is the 22nd of May 1939. We'll be ready in 2 or 3 years. Now, spoiler alert, World War II actually started in September of 1939, so not in 2 or 3 years as Mussolini was expecting. So when Hitler attacked Poland in 1939, he did this because he had actually made a secret deal with this gentleman in the other photo, Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. That deal had been made in August, where Germany and the USSR had sort of agreed, okay, you invade Poland from this side, we'll invade from the other side, and we'll split it down the middle. So while Hitler's invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939 is seen to be the start of World War II, what seems to get forgotten is the USSR invaded Poland on the other side of the country, September 15th, 1939. Stalin was actually not an enemy of Hitler until Hitler invaded the Soviet Union 2 years later, which is kind of exactly the sort of guy that Hitler is. He makes deals with people and then goes back on it, which is kind of what happened with Mussolini here, the poor gentleman. Oh, what a shame. Because Mussolini had not been told about the Pact of, the Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union. He did not know about this, despite the Pact of Steel, which said everything we do in our military and economic policy has to be the same. Germany had gone ahead and made a military deal with the Soviet Union and not told Mussolini. This was the first time that Mussolini came to realize that he is not an equal of Hitler. Hitler doesn't actually care about him. Hitler doesn't listen to him, and he has no influence. So that was the outcome of the Pact of Steel. At first, Mussolini thought he was, at the very least, an equal of Hitler, or given his arrogance as a particular dictator. Maybe he even saw himself as a bit of an older brother figure. I've been in power since 1922. I can tell Hitler how to run a country. But by 1939, and particularly with the invasion of Poland in September of 1939, Mussolini realized that he had no power here. He had no place to make these decisions. So, outcome of the Pact of Steel was that Italy was tied to Germany as an ally through World War II, and that didn't exactly work out very well for Italy, and it didn't particularly work out very well for Mussolini. So, if we've learned anything from this experience, it's don't trust Adolf Hitler. I hope we knew that already. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this particular deep dive, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you tomorrow.